Chapter 1. Memories in Snow. There was a curious door in the dining room of the Masaki household. It was a run-of-the-mill closet door, utilizing the space under the stairs that led to the second floor. An ordinary, wooden door. However, it was curiously built. Behind it was another staircase, but the steps only seemed to go down about a meter or so from the floor, with nothing beyond. It was quite a pointless door. Indeed, it was peculiar. Let's see. These are for Grandpa. Sasami brought in an armful of mail from the gateposts, or rather, the gatekeepers/mailboxes, Azaka and Kamadake, Aika's two guardians, and came into the dining room, sorting the letters in an organized fashion. But then, there was not much sorting to do. Besides the occasional letter for Tenchi, all the mail delivered to the Masaki household was addressed to Katsuhito, the shrine priest. Needless to say, there was no way Sasami and the others, who were not from Earth, would get any mail. She knew that it was their choice to be here, but it was just the other day that Sasami had to say goodbye to her parents, whom she had not seen in so long. A whisper of loneliness brushed past her heart. She did not show any of this emotion as she spread out the letters on the tatami mats in the dining area. With cheeks still smattered with freckles, Sasami looked like a young girl, but she had achieved remarkable psychological growth since arriving here on Earth. When she came to the 15th plain white envelope, Sasami paused. This one's for Washuone-chan. She looked more closely at the letter. Hakubi Washisama. Yup, it's to Washuone-chan. Let's see, who's it? From? Meow. Right when Sasami flipped over the envelope to verify the sender's name, she noticed that humanoid Ryoki, who had transformed into a little girl, sat perched beside her. Meow. As if expecting something, Ryoki cried again. Her hands clutched the small, carrot-shaped knapsack Aika had made for her. Sasami chuckled and offered the stack of mail to Ryoki. Ryo-chan, here's today's lot. Ryoki always took Katsuhito's mail to the shrine at the top of the hill. She merrily stuffed the letters into her bag and dashed outside, happy that there was something she could do to help, whether it was with Sasami's work or someone else's. Off you go. Be careful now. Sasami saw her off and took the remaining letters upstairs. Oh, that's right. There was a letter for Washuone-chan today. Only mail for Katsuhito or Tenchi got sent to the Masaki household. Sasami was in the habit of taking Tenchi's letters to the desk in his room immediately after entrusting Katsuhito's pile to Ryoki. She paused to ponder whether she should go give Washo her letter first. Then she laughed to herself. It doesn't matter who's first. She gave herself a little slap on the forehead and airily went up the stairs. On the spacious third-floor landing, Ryoko leaned against the many carrot-shaped cushions she had gathered, reading manga from the library of Tenchi's father, Nobuyuki. She was currently reading Checking In on You, Volume 17 of 20. In Volume 17, Michiko, the main character, went through an ill-fated breakup with her lover, Tomohiro. It was quite the page-turner. Sasami spotted Ryoko as she came up the stairs and called out, "Oh, Ryoko-one-chan." "Hey." Ryoko responded by popping her hand up, not taking her eyes off the page. She didn't turn to face Sasami because she was right at an emotional scene and tears were in danger of spilling from her eyes. Ever since she merged with Ryoko Zero, it had gotten easier for her to empathize with this kind of story. Sasami, of course, had no way of knowing this. "Ryoko-one-chan, I'd like to air out the cushions in the sun. Is that okay?" "Here you go." The cushions came flying towards Sasami without missing a beat, but they were not aimed at her. They sailed over her head, past the door to Tenchi's room, and the metal-framed glass sliding door left open for ventilation, and landed perfectly on the deck beyond. Sasami went to place Tenchi's mail on his desk as the carrot cushions continued to sail through the air behind her. She quietly watched Ryoko's perfect-as-always aim, waited for a pause in the pitching, and popped her head out to thank her. "Thanks, Ryoko-one-wo." A carrot cushion hit Sasami's face with perfect timing. She came to her senses at Ryoko's laughter and glared at her, clutching the cushion on top of her head. "Ryoko One-chan." Before she could throw it back, Ryoko phased through the floorboards, carrying her manga. Phasing through solid walls was one of her special abilities. "She got away," Sasami muttered. Carrying the cushion to the deck, she dusted it off and lined all the cushions up on top of the 2 bamboo poles threaded through the railing. Airing them out in the sun, flipping them over once, and leaving them there until evening should get them nice and fluffy. Sasami did this every day because Ryo-oki loved sitting on the fluffiest cushions. "This'll make Ryo-chan happy." Imagining Ryo-oki happily frolicking with the cushions, Sasami smiled, forgetting Ryoko's little prank. By the time Sasami finished up and came downstairs, Ryo-oki had also returned from her delivery. "That was fast." "Thanks, Ryo-chan." It had been less than 20 minutes. Ryo-oki could barely waddle a few months ago, and now she could reproduce her critter mode speed when in human form. "I'm going to deliver a letter to Washione-chan. Wanna come with me?" "Meow." Ryo-oki answered happily. With Sasami leading her by the hand, they went to the door below the stairs, holding the letter for Washo. "Washione-chan." Sasami knocked and opened the door matter-of-factly. A peculiar view spread before them. There was that ordinary closet door which led to the space below the stairs. In fact, there were stairs, but they only went down about a meter underground and were pretty useless. However, beyond the door Sasami opened was a vast space that should have been physically impossible. This structurally useless door led to the lair, laboratory of Hakubi Washu, a scientific genius and the greatest mind in the galaxy. Close to the center of the room, which was too big to even be called a room, sat Washu, tapping away at her terminal. The monitor was covered in geometric forms. She was overseeing simulations of her research, analyzing results, and generally conducting some questionable experiments. "What's up?" "Seems a little early for lunch." Touch-typing unerringly, Washu spoke to Sasami without looking away from the monitor. "There's a letter for you," Sasami plainly stated without unnecessary detail. She knew from experience that was the best way to talk to Washu while she was absorbed in her research. "A letter for me?" Washu's fingers paused and she turned around, looking curiously at the envelope Sasami held out. After all, it was a regular paper envelope made on Earth. "I didn't think I knew anybody on Earth with whom I would exchange correspondence." Written on the envelope, in beautiful penmanship, was the name Hakubi Washu-sama. Washu instantly ruled out any chance of the letter being a mistake or prank, considering her current environment and situation. The only possible sender was someone who knew that she was on Earth and who purposefully chose the old-fashioned Earth tradition of writing her a letter. There were plenty of people she knew who would be odd enough, or rather, fanciful enough, to do something so elaborate. Washu flipped the envelope over. "Masaki? Kasumi? I wonder who that is." She understood that the name belonged to someone from Jurai, but she did not recognize it. It made perfect sense, of course, that the letter was from a Jurian. Information on what happened on Earth was under Jurai's control, and there was practically no chance of other intelligence agencies getting their hands on the information. Not even the fact that the Emperor of Jurai and his 2 empresses had visited Earth leaked to the outside world. The name uses different characters for Masaki, but is it someone Tenchi Muyo knows? "Oh! I bet that's the name of Taro-chan's mother." Sasami cried out. As soon as Washu heard Taro's name, she turned eyes of surprise and agitation to Sasami, which was very unusual for the usually composed scientist. "Taro-chan's mother? Definitely. Masaki is her last name," Sasami said confidently as she came to Washu's side and peered at the envelope. Kasumi, Taro's mother, was Tenchi's second cousin. Several months ago, she had been suddenly hospitalized for an illness, so the Masaki household had taken care of Taro for a time. Ryoko, Tenchi, and the others were not used to handling babies, so Washu had looked after Taro. But it had reminded her of some bittersweet memories. If Taro's mother had sent the letter, as Sasami said, It made sense that it was addressed to Washu. It was probably a thank you note. Mew, meow. Someone else was also upset to hear Taro's name, Ryooki. Perhaps she remembered being harassed while Taro was visiting. As soon as Sasami uttered the name, she reverted to Cabot form. She clung behind Sasami's shoulder, rigid and nervous. Sasami picked up the backpack that had dropped to the floor and gently petted Ryooki to reassure her. It's okay, Ryo-chan. Meow. Ryooki popped back into humanoid mode. Washu turned with a gentle smile. Thanks for the mail, Sasami-chan. I'll read it later. Huh? Oh, okay. Sasami was a bit curious for news of Taro. She hadn't been able to help care for him since a number of things were troubling her at the time. She was very interested in the contents of Taro's mother's letter but could not bring herself to ask to read something addressed to Washu, so she reluctantly but cheerfully said, I'll call you when lunch is ready. She took Ryooki's hand to leave the room. Ryooki, however, stiffened and would not move. She looked expectantly towards Washu. Ryo-chan. Washu, musing over the envelope, understood, petted her head, and said gently, Thanks, Ryooki. I'll be counting on you. Meow. Washu made sure that Sasami and Ryooki were gone and then held the envelope in both hands. Her fingers froze, and she kept staring at it. A long period of silence ensued. She eventually closed her eyes, releasing a huge breath. Taking the envelope and standing up, she walked towards a different door than the one that continued to the Masaki house. The door opened silently, and the blowing breeze lightly ruffled Washu's hair. Beyond the door was a park-like landscape surrounded by trees. Besides the trees, several different types of plants grew in cases of various sizes. It was more a botanical garden than a park. Once through the door, Washu kicked lightly off from the ground. As casually as if she were skipping, she floated about 10 inches off the ground without falling back down and soared through the air. She could fly. Just like Ryoko, she could float through the air without mechanical assistance. It was hardly surprising, since she was Ryoko's mother, but Washu made it a point not to use this ability in her daily life. She simply liked to walk. It feels good, and it's healthy to boot. In fact, Washu had never shown the others that she could fly. If they had seen, their jaws would have dropped to the floor in surprise. Well, that would be a sight to behold. Washu chuckled to herself, imagining their shocked faces. She wove her way between the trees. The place where she was going was quite a distance on foot. She could go there instantaneously if she used the door to the Masaki house, but she wanted to take her time today. She needed to prepare herself to read the letter. After traveling several kilometers through the arboretum, a small building appeared before Washu. Its door opened automatically as if to welcome her in. Inside, the view changed completely. All the walls and surfaces besides the floor, or perhaps windows, showed pitch-black darkness. The cosmos stretched out in all directions. Anyone stepping into this room for the first time would scream, feeling disorientation akin to being tossed into outer space. Washu entered the building as if drifting through zero gravity. Before her, 5 planets spread out in a gentle arc. The building she had entered was a large orbital elevator, and her lab was a large artificial satellite floating in space. It consisted of those 5 different types of planets, centered on the research satellite she had just been in. They orbited an existing star system, not something fixed in hyperspace. The lab was connected to the door in the Masaki house using a massive amount of energy. One of Washu's planets had an astronomical observatory. It was not very large and not properly equipped, but it was a replica of the one Washu lived in long ago. An hour after she left her lab, Washu was in this old, disorganized room, sitting in an antique rocking chair. She always came here when she wanted to reflect alone upon the 20,000 years of her vast life. In the room was a dresser, decorated with several framed pictures. Washu's attention was fixed on a picture of a baby with an innocent smile and large green eyes, the same as Washu's. The eyes seemed to stare into Washu's soul. Good grief. What was the matter with me? Washa remembered having to say goodbye to Taro and writhed in embarrassment. This was not something she could afford to have anyone witness. But she had allowed Tenchi to see something similar. The time isn't yet right for that. It was still too early to force a decision on Tenchi. There was an order to things. Ryoko, Aika, Sasami, Mihoshi, Hei, and Ryooki, maybe. Or are there more? Swaying in the rocking chair, Washi removed the stationery paper from the envelope. Dear Hakubi Washa-sama, the note began. It continued with words of thanks and gratitude, describing how Taro was doing. It was polite but minimal, limited to the essential points. It was so generic that, at a glance, it seemed to be a courtesy letter, implying that Taro's mother was not even that grateful to have her child looked after. In actual fact, Washa was aware that this letter held an important meaning. Its familiar format was also used for reports at the Galaxy Academy. I see. She's Tenchi Dano's family, after all. I got careless. It should have been obvious. The postscript stated, please, keep this secret from Tenchi-chan. Secret from Tenchi Dano? Washa murmured with a full heart. She glanced at the enclosed picture of Taro and his happy parents and raised it to compare to the picture on the dresser. The distance between the two pictures was fate and time. I'm happy for you, Taro. Right as Washa was about to put the letter away, Sasami's voice rang in the room out of nowhere. Washu-one-chan? It's time to eat. All right, I'll be right there. Washa's lab was expansive. She usually worked on her research through simulations in the living room on the space station, but she periodically made her rounds to other places. Nobody would ever be able to find her at those times. That was why she had placed an intercom on the Masaki house door that connected directly to her. She did this partly because an unwitting trespasser would run into several dangerous pitfalls. The biggest reason, however, was as a countermeasure against Mihoshi. Washu had reason enough to be cautious. By the time Washu arrived in the Masaki house's living room, everyone but Mihoshi was seated. You're late, Washu-one-chan. Sorry about that. I had some stuff to take care of. Washu apologized to Sasami, taking her seat. At the same moment, Mihoshi appeared in the door Washu had just emerged from. Oh, Washa-san. Where have you been? Mihoshi took her seat. Sasami looked at her skeptically. Sasami never picked Mihoshi to fetch Washu from her lab. Since she was the genius of chance, Mihoshi's coincidences always ended up fortuitous in the end. The problem was the process. When Washu was involved, for some reason, the coincidences often took the shape of chaos and destruction. No matter how favorable the results, getting that chaos under control after the fact was too much trouble to ever be worth it. Of course, Mihoshi was careful in her way, so not everything she touched was exposed to the ferocity of her coincidences. But there were moments after which something always broke or got out of hand because of Mihoshi. This would not be a problem if the incidents were confined to the Masaki house. Aika pointlessly falling into the pond, for example, or something falling on Ryoko's head, or the carrots Tenchi harvested rolling down the hill for a mile, or someone stepping on Ryooki's tail, or a dish breaking, or a faucet breaking, or even a shuttle crashing to Earth and flooding the house. There were many options, but they were limited to the formulaic jokes commonly seen on sitcoms. If something happened in Washu's lab, however, it wouldn't be easy to shrug off. Having Mihoshi summon Washu was like making a campfire to roast potatoes in an explosives factory, and Sasami would never do that. Unfortunately, Mihoshi was not the type of person who sat there and did nothing until she was asked. She had helpfully gone to call Washu on her own. Noticing Sasami's concern, Washu smiled gently to reassure her. Sasami, relieved, started to serve the rice. Mihoshi Dano, where were you looking? Washu asked, knowing it was too late. Well, first. Keep it short, Washu remembered to add. Okay. Well, there were dark places and bright places, hot places and cold places. Oh, thanks, Sasami. Mihoshi paused to accept the bowl of rice Sasami passed her. Washa thanked Sasami internally for the quick thinking. Mahoshi's answer was always the same, and there was no point in asking. Washu had just set up the new anti-Mahoshi security system, and she decided to chalk this up to a test run. She would eventually find out what Mahoshi had done, and with more updates, a perfect anti-Mahoshi security system would be complete. A system that could handle the genius of coincidence, that singular perfection. It'll be a bestseller for sure. Many people would want one. But the first in line, cash in hand, would be the Galaxy Police. After lunch, everyone was free to nap. Washu retreated to her lab, changed, and came out dressed to collect plant specimens. First, however, she headed towards Sasami, who was cleaning up in the kitchen. Sasami-chan, this was in that letter. Washu had noticed that Sasami was curious about the letter and now gave her the picture of Taro with his parents. Everyone's doing well. Taro's mother has gotten better and can return home. Really? That's great, Sasami smiled. Show that picture to the others. I have to go out. But it looks like it's going to rain. Sasami looked towards the window. Heavy clouds had rolled in. It's supposed to be sunny today. Well, I'll be fine. Washa waved and headed out of the kitchen towards the front door. Off to collect specimens? Tenchi came down the stairs. Yeah, a few, Washu answered, feigning serenity. Internally, she remembered the letter and the picture, saying goodbye to Taro and the words she had almost said to Tenchi. She tried desperately not to blush. What's the matter? Nothing. Washu opened the door to escape. A breeze, rather chilly for spring, swept in. It's like winter has come back, Washu-san. Ever since he saw Washu's tears when they said goodbye to Taro, Tenchi sometimes addressed Washu using the san honorific rather than chan. Washu did not comment. To her, Tenchi was not the past, but the future itself. Will you be okay, dressed like that? It's fine. Besides, I'll be right back. To an outside observer, Tenchi seemed to be an older brother concerned about his little sister. But Washu's tone was full of affection, more like a mother with a son anxious about house-sitting. Tenchi noticed that tone, blushed, and looked away. See you later, Tenchi Dano, she said gently and walked off towards the mountains. Tenchi watched her for a while, shivered at the incoming chill, and looked up at the sky. Cold white flakes came fluttering down and melted into drops of water against his warm cheek. It's snow. He gazed at the increasing flurries for a while. Suddenly growing concerned, he looked in the direction Washu had walked off. Washa-san, it's snowing, but as if she had melted into the snow, Washa was gone. It's coming down hard, isn't it? It doesn't usually stick like this. Aika and Tenchi watched the snow fall, murmuring. In South Okayama, where they lived, it occasionally snowed, but rarely accumulated. Snowfall would melt the next day at the latest. Is Washu-one-chan going to be okay? Asked Sasami, folding the laundry she had brought inside. That cold-blooded witch will be fine. I wouldn't be surprised if she was the one making it snow in the first place, spat Ryoko, tears swimming in her eyes. She had just finished volume 19 of Checking In on You, which was a turbulent mess of climaxing storylines. That would make her the Snow Queen, said Tenchi, appalled. That's Ryoko-san's mother. After all, Aika casually teased, triggering an immediate glare in reaction from Ryoko. To avoid getting involved, Sasami and Tenchi headed for the sofa area with tea and snacks. Mahoshi was already there. She took a rice cracker from Tenchi's box of snacks. Stuffing her mouth, she asked, Henhihin wafafwao queen? Please ask again after you've swallowed. Gulp. Tenchi-san, what's a snow queen? Oh, she's a character in folk tales. A winter apparition who lives on snowy mountains. She can manipulate snow and ice. Tenchi told Mahoshi the gist of the tale, but since he was not well versed in the story, made things up here and there. Sasami and Mahoshi sat and listened, riveted. Fairy tales from Earth were new to them. That was interesting. There's a story like that on my planet, too. Really, Mahoshi-one-chan? She's making things up. Don't lead people on, Mahoshi. Ryoko, who had bailed on the standoff with Aika, floated above them. Aika, left behind, looked at her grumpily, then gave up and joined the conversation. What? But my great-grandmother said she saw her when she was little. Mihoshi shrank back at Ryoko's glare. Are you sure? Ryoko demanded. I think so. Sasami and Ryooki came between them. Mihoshi One-chan, tell us the story of the Snow Queen. Ryo-chan, you want to hear it too, right? Meow. I'd love to hear it as well. The vote from Tenchi settled it. Everyone sat around to listen to Mihoshi's story. They couldn't work in the fields because of the snow, and the gloomy light made the atmosphere perfect for ghost stories. Okay then. Hold on, Ryoko interrupted. Ignoring Aika's teasing, she closed the curtains, lit candles to intensify the mood, and plunked a bottle of sake next to her. Okay, I'm ready. You may begin, Mihoshi. Ryoko, I'm not telling a ghost story or anything. Mihoshi remembered the hullabaloo over the supposed ghost at the hot springs resort run by Tenchi's relatives and made a pitiful, reluctant face. It was hard to blame her, as she had passed out from fear during that incident. Just get started already. Oh, okay. Mihoshi cleared her throat, paused, and started to talk quietly. The planet Senua, where I was born, is covered in snow for almost half the year, even close to the equator. Her voice was low, and she used it well for emphasis. Although she was the biggest scaredy cat, she joined in the fun when people gathered, despite her complaints. My great-grandmother had a stepbrother from her parents' remarriage. He was 6 months older. She married him when she grew up, had my grandmother, and then... We don't care about your family tree, you idiot. Just get to the story. Ryoko yelled, already drunk. I am so sorry. Misplaced attention to detail was very characteristic of Mihoshi. Well, this story I'm about to tell you happened when my great-grandfather was 5 years old and my great-grandmother was 4. She spoke matter-of-factly, and the others listened intently. The snow continued to fall,